Lister, I have not, because of the efforts of so many and generations before me, some of them family members who've stood in my name in other places, I have not had to face that kind of circumstance, and I'm grateful for that. I just simply say I am troubled by the idea of academics, well qualified, bureaucrats, well qualified, and some military are going to inquire into all this sort of thing. I hope they get the values and the principles and the support for these guys right. I just find the whole thing sad and demeaning, and very sad and demeaning.
Indeed. I've actually questioned over the last few days, just to myself, whether this is actually in the national interest, if this is in the public interest to be brought out and have this dirty laundry aired. We know this is not something systemic in our ADF. This is something. There's a small group of individuals. Clearly, we don't yet know the details that have committed atrocities. But I'd love to echo what Fitzgibbon said, and he himself is a former Minister of Defence, and he said these guys were deployed for too long and on back-to-back deployments. And as you've said, Gary, you and I and millions of Australian civilians have absolutely no idea what that's like. And we have no idea what that's like thanks to these men and women who go and do it for us so that we can sleep in our beds every night knowing that we're safe. And even I, though, being a civilian as I am, I'm not above wondering. I don't think any of us can be above saying I would never do this or I would never do that after what these people have been through. Senator Roberts just raised Andrew Hastie, member for Canning, and I remember reading years ago, it would have been, because he was quite new to Parliament at the time, and he won't mind me sharing because this is on the public record, he shared it himself, that even as he was doing his training, these grueling days and days on end that they'd be sent on to have to undergo unspeakable, not only temperatures, but conditions, no sleep for days on end, all the rest of it. And he shared coming back from this particular training trip, just sobbing down the end of the line to his lovely wife, Ruth. The stuff these guys go through breaks them. It absolutely breaks them. And I'm not making excuses for atrocities they may have committed in the line of duty, but we have to keep that in mind, that human beings cannot go through prolonged periods of these high pressure, no sleep, adrenaline running through your veins 24/7, that kind of fear, the environment we can't even imagine for days on end and then still function properly. They just can't.
And well, Gary, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think there's something... I think there's another factor here too that we must...
I'll let Malcolm just get one line in and I'll come to you.
Yeah, that's something you mentioned in the material you sent out, and that is that there's a catch and release policy for people. You can't hold them, you can't detain them. So some of these people were out to kill our soldiers. They catch them, our soldiers catch them, and then have to let them go again because it's not a proper theatre of war. I know that if I was under that scenario, I'd be thinking twice about letting them go, and there's no way to keep them. What else are you going to do? You know, when people's minds are under that much stress, Brom and Gary, you know, we've got to be understanding and compassionate about that.
And Brom, I think, and I don't mean to demean my sincerity at all, but I think about Jack Nicholson's line in A Few Good Men. You know, can we handle the truth? I mean, it's kind of... I guess, if they've done the wrong thing, the system will out, but I am concerned about it.
Gary, I sat in that Parliament, in the House of Representatives, as we stood again and again mourning the death of a soldier in Afghanistan. And we made grave speeches about their sacrifice for us, the way they represented us. We, as a people... Our governments, both Labor and Liberal, sent those men to fight for our principles in a foreign land. And as I said, we eulogised and spoke of them. I even attended ramp ceremonies when those bodies were returned to Australia. And yet this same government that we sent to fight for us is now attacking our own people, our own soldiers. I worked as hard as I could not to have Australia sign up to the International Criminal Court because I could see how it could be used against us as a matter of international propaganda. But the reality was that Alexander Downer had virtually committed us, but one thing I did get added was a footnote that said we would never hand over any of our soldiers to that court, which is the threat that is held over if we don't investigate, they'll do. But I insisted that that went in. Now let's look what's happened. Mr Justice Legay Brereton, Major General Legay Brereton, a former commander of the 5th Brigade, the 2nd Division, has spent 4 years investigating these issues. 4 years. That investigation actually advertised in Afghanistan for Afghanis to come forward and testify or give evidence against our soldiers. We paid for people to go there to try and find people who would either tell the truth or tell lies. How do we know?
Unbelievable. 4
years this has gone on. And those men have lived with that for these 4 years. We are now told that there is a report that's going to be released, which we will find shocking. Peter Jennings has very wisely warned that this will be used by ISIS in a recruiting program for them to say they're justified in taking the lives of Australians. And that will be civilian as well as military people. We are hanging these people out to dry and saying that the response is we will have a further investigation. And that investigation will see whether or not there should be any prosecutions in line with the requirements under the ICC. We will never hand over any of our soldiers to that court for them to make the investigation. And if you take a look at who sits on it and would be sitting in judgment on us, I just get anger, which is beyond belief. So can I say that we have a huge obligation to the men and women who serve. 29,000 people have served in Afghanistan. When I was Minister for Defence, Industry, Science and Personnel, we didn't send many people overseas at all. It was into Bosnia then, and they had to go via being seconded into the British Army, and then they could go across and fight. But the long and the short of it is that they have worn our uniform under our flag to support our values. Now, our values are important.
Exactly.
But for the government to turn on our soldiers and to hold them up through this period, we have had something like, we have lost more soldiers in the years we've been in Afghanistan to suicide than we lost in combat. So just understand the stresses that they're under, and understand one more point. The rules under which they fight are called terms of engagement. And they literally write down what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And then there is a definition of what is an atrocity or what is a war crime set out in the ICC. And this is what is almost like being told you go there to fight with one arm behind your back. I can only say, as I sat in that parliament and heard the eulogies of these men and the others who equally served with great valour, and attending that ramp ceremony to receive those bodies back, and for us now to be putting the whole of our ADF under some sort of additional pressure, I find very difficult to come to terms with indeed. We owe these men a lot.
Hear, hear.
I congratulate you on what you've just said, and I thank you for your eloquence, but the substance of your argument. And I also make this very plain observation. We did this, the Australian government did this, made these announcements in the week of Remembrance-Day.
Correct.
I find it just sickening to my core, and I hold all of my freedoms in the palm of my hand and at the tip of my tongue purely off the back of those who've served this nation. and I feel very emotional about it as well. Going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll stand up for the workers of Australia. Somebody has to. More in a moment.